Welcome aboard the Midnight Voyage. Tonight, we leave the ordinary behind and drift into the timeless, a journey through history, space, and imagination, crafted to ease you into sleep. Before we sail, tell me, where in the world are you joining me from tonight? Share your country in the comments and let's travel together. Our story tonight takes us to the vast, open oceans of the past, where ancient sailors ventured across seas with no maps, no GPS, only the stars to guide them. We'll uncover the celestial patterns they trusted, the constellations that whispered directions, and the cosmic secrets that turned the night sky into a navigator's most powerful tool. The ocean has always been both a promise and a mystery. Long before compasses, charts, or satellites, humankind stood at the edges of land and gazed out across the horizon, wondering what lay beyond. The sea shimmered like a mirror of the night sky, endless and unknowable, reflecting back our deepest fears and brightest dreams. For those early people, the waves were not simply water, but a living force, an expanse that called, whispered, and sometimes roared with a voice older than civilization itself. Imagine yourself there, thousands of years ago. The world is quieter, untouched by the engines and technologies we take for granted today. You stand on a rugged shoreline, perhaps in the Mediterranean or along the Pacific Islands, the salty air brushing against your skin. In the distance, the sea stretches endlessly, dark blue in the day, silver under moonlight. For the first humans to stand on those shores, the ocean was the edge of the known world. And yet, despite the danger, despite the fear, the call of the sea was irresistible. Why? Because the sea promised both survival and discovery. To fish its waters meant food. To cross its expanse meant trade, new lands, and the chance to expand horizons, both literal and metaphorical. But in order to cross, people needed guidance. Unlike the predictable paths of rivers or the firm familiarity of mountains, the sea offered no markers, no signs. A person adrift upon it could easily lose themselves. So from the very beginning, navigation became not just a science, but a story. The earliest sailors looked upward. The stars became their companions, the sky their map. At first, the connection was simple observation, that the stars rose and set in patterns, that some returned each season while others were constant. Slowly, through centuries of watching and remembering, these lights became guides. But before we reach that point, before we chart the heavens, we must linger here at the shoreline of imagination, where myth and necessity first converged. The sea was never empty in the minds of ancient people. It was filled with spirits and gods. For the Greeks, it was ruled by Poseidon, mighty and temperamental, capable of granting smooth passage or summoning storms with a flick of his trident. For the Norse, the sea belonged to Aegir and Ran, a couple who alternated between hospitality and cruelty, sometimes offering feasts in their halls beneath the waves, sometimes dragging sailors down to their deaths. In Polynesian traditions, the ocean was alive with mana, spiritual energy, and voyaging was not merely physical but also sacred. Each wave carried meaning. Each current suggested intention. The stars above and the waters below became intertwined in the human imagination. To sail was not only to risk one's body, but also to step into a dialogue with forces larger than oneself. Now, close your eyes for a moment and picture that first canoe sliding into the sea. The paddles dip, the water ripples outward, and behind the sailors, the shoreline shrinks until it is only a memory. Ahead lies the horizon, endless and uncertain. Above, the stars prick the sky with cold fire. These voyagers do not know for certain if they will return, but they trust in their courage, in the wisdom passed down through stories, and in the mysterious lights overhead. The call of the sea was not only about travel, it was also about identity. Entire civilizations defined themselves through their relationship with water. The Phoenicians, a seafaring people of the ancient Mediterranean, built their wealth and power upon ships that crisscrossed the region. For them, the sea was not a boundary but a highway, a living thread that stitched together ports and cultures. The Polynesians, on the other side of the world, carried their heritage in double-hulled canoes, voyaging across vast stretches of the Pacific long before compasses existed. For them, the ocean was not emptiness. It was a path filled with signs, from the color of the waves to the flight of birds to the arrangement of stars. And yet, even for those civilizations most at home on the water, the sea never lost its danger. Storms appeared suddenly. Currents dragged ships off course. A journey that began in hope could end in despair. Perhaps this is why the sea's call was so powerful, because it demanded respect. To answer it was to accept risk. To sail was to admit that human beings, no matter how clever, were still small beneath the vastness of nature. In this way, the sea mirrors the human spirit itself. We are drawn to what is unknown, even when it frightens us. The horizon calls because it represents possibility. The stars beckon because they hint at meaning. And so, again and again, people stepped into boats, leaving behind the safety of land to venture into mystery. Pause here and breathe slowly, as if you too are sitting in one of those vessels, rocking gently with the waves. Hear the sound of water slapping against wood. Feel the cool night air on your skin. Above, the constellations begin to appear, bright against the velvet darkness. For those ancient sailors, each star was more than a pinprick of light. It was a sign, a story, a compass point written in the heavens. But before they fully understood how to use those stars, they told stories about them. Myth was the first navigation. Orion was not just a hunter, but a marker of the changing seasons. The Pleiades, a cluster of stars, became sisters, guiding travelers and farmers alike. In different cultures, the same patterns carried different names, but all shared one truth. The sky was alive with meaning. And so, the call of the sea and the call of the stars became intertwined. To look at the waves was to wonder where they led. To look at the stars was to dream of the way forward. Together, they formed the first map, etched not on parchment, but in memory, story, and song. This is where our voyage begins, at the threshold of mystery. The sea calls, the stars answer. And humanity steps forward into history, into discovery, into dreams. Now let your mind drift, as if you are floating between waking and sleep, between land and horizon. For this is not only a story of ancient sailors, it is also your story, a reminder that within each of us lies the same urge. To explore, to imagine, to cross the boundaries of the known. As the chapter closes, let the waves of thought soften. Ahead lies more, the first navigators, the constellations they trusted, the myths that shaped their journeys. But for now, let the rhythm of the sea carry you. You are safe, you are guided, and the voyage has only just begun. If Chapter 1 was about the sea's mysterious call, Chapter 2 is about the first brave souls who answered it. Long before GPS, maps, or compasses, there were people who pushed their wooden boats into vast waters, guided by little more than instinct, courage, and the night sky. They were the first navigators, and their journeys laid the foundation for everything we know about travel, exploration, and discovery. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. The year is thousands of years before our modern world. The shoreline is lit by small fires, their smoke curling into the sky. Families gather near canoes carved from hollowed logs or lashed together with rope and palm fiber. There are no engines, no steel hulls, no radar screens. There is only the ocean, endless, unpredictable, and alive. And yet, with steady hands and steady hearts, these first navigators pushed away from shore, answering the sea's eternal invitation. Who were they? They came from many places, scattered across the globe. In the vast Pacific Ocean, the Polynesians stand out as some of the most remarkable navigators in human history. Imagine trying to cross thousands of miles of open water without a compass. To most of us, it sounds impossible, but to them, it was part of life. They developed an incredible system called wayfinding, a method that combined deep observation of nature with generational memory. They read the stars like a book, memorizing the way constellations rose and set in specific places along the horizon. They studied the waves, recognizing subtle differences in swells that told them which direction land might be. They noticed the flight patterns of birds, knowing some species could only fly a certain distance from shore. Even the color of the ocean water itself carried meaning, hinting at whether coral reefs or islands might be near. These skills weren't written in books. They were sung in chants, remembered in stories, and passed from master navigators to apprentices. A Polynesian navigator didn't just learn to steer a canoe, they inherited a tradition that connected the sea, the sky, and the soul. For them, voyaging wasn't just travel. It was a sacred practice, a dialogue with the ocean itself. Meanwhile, across the world, in the ancient Mediterranean, another group of people were carving out their reputation as master sailors, the Phoenicians. Based in the region that is now Lebanon, these people built sturdy ships and traveled widely, establishing trade networks that connected the Mediterranean world. For the Phoenicians, the sea was a highway of commerce. They transported goods like glass, textiles, and cedar wood across the known world. But more than that, they carried knowledge. Each journey added to their understanding of winds, currents, and coastlines. The Phoenicians are often credited with developing the first true alphabet, and in many ways, their ships became vehicles of culture as much as commerce. Their navigators learned to hug coastlines when possible, using landmarks for orientation. But when the time came to sail across open water, they, too, turned their eyes to the heavens. Ancient records suggest they relied on the North Star Polaris as their guide. This star, fixed in the northern sky, offered something precious, a constant point of reference. To this day, it remains a symbol of direction and hope. The Egyptians, too, had their relationship with the sea, particularly the Nile and the Mediterranean. They weren't as famous as the Phoenicians for ocean voyages, but their connection to water was deep. Their boats carried grain, stone, and goods along the Nile, and some ventured into the Red Sea for trade. For Egyptians, the stars weren't only navigation tools, they were woven into religion and architecture. Temples and pyramids were aligned with celestial bodies, showing how much importance they placed on the heavens. For them, as for so many ancient peoples, the night sky wasn't just decoration, it was a guide, a calendar, a clock, and a source of power. What unites all these early navigators, Polynesians, Phoenicians, Egyptians, is courage. To us, the ocean can feel overwhelming even with modern ships and equipment. Imagine setting out in a canoe or a wooden ship, uncertain if you would ever return. Imagine trusting only your memory of the stars, your feeling of the waves, and the wisdom of those who came before you. These voyages weren't reckless. They were calculated acts of faith. The navigators knew the risks, but they also trusted in air skills, in tradition, and in the patterns of nature. Slowly, piece by piece, they built a mental map of the world, not on parchment, but in their minds and hearts. And that map expanded human imagination. With every successful voyage, the world felt a little less vast, a little more connected. New lands were discovered, new trade routes were forged, new ideas spread. Civilization itself grew stronger because of those who dared to leave the shoreline. Think about how incredible it is. The very first maps were written not with ink, but with starlight. The very first compasses weren't made of metal, but of memory. The way a certain constellation tilted on the horizon, the way a swell pushed against a canoe. For the Polynesians, sailing under the stars was like stepping into a cosmic classroom. The constellations weren't distant, they were companions. For the Phoenicians, the North Star wasn't just a light, it was a guardian. For the Egyptians, the heavens were a bridge between earth and the divine. As you drift into sleep tonight, imagine lying on the deck of one of those ancient vessels. The water rocks you gently, the sky is filled with shimmering stars, and somewhere at the front of the ship, a navigator whispers chants or prayers, reciting the wisdom that will carry everyone safely to their destination. The ocean is vast, yes, but you are not lost. You are guided by the same stars that guided them. We often think of technology as progress, but the truth is that some of the most advanced sciences of human history were born in the distant past. Celestial navigation, the art of finding your way using the sky, is one of them. Without it, humanity would have been confined to narrow coastlines, afraid to cross the open seas. With it, cultures connected, ideas spread, and our ancestors took their first steps toward becoming a global species. Even today, with satellites orbiting Earth and GPS in our pockets, there is something humbling about looking up at the stars. They remind us that the sky is a map older than any civilization. They remind us that every journey begins with curiosity, with the courage to say, what lies beyond? And so, the first navigators, Polynesians on their canoes, Phoenicians on their merchant ships, Egyptians on the Nile, gave us more than trade or travel. They gave us imagination. They proved that the unknown could be crossed, that mystery could become map, that story could become science. Their legacy is still alive in us. Every time we look at the stars and wonder about other worlds, every time we board a plane or a ship and trust the journey ahead, we echo their courage. The first navigators are part of our collective memory, part of the reason we keep exploring, keep voyaging, keep dreaming. For as long as humans have looked upward, the night sky has been a source of wonder. To some, it was the dwelling place of gods. To others, it was a clock, a calendar, or a book of stories written in light. But for sailors, those glittering stars were more than symbols. They were tools, they were guides. They were a map, vast, eternal, and free to anyone willing to learn its language. Tonight, we sail into that ancient map, drifting among constellations and planets, learning how early. Navigators read the heavens to find their way across oceans. Picture yourself standing on the deck of a wooden ship. The waves rock gently beneath your feet. The air is cool, the horizon endless. Around you, darkness stretches in every direction, but above, the sky glitters with thousands of points of light. To the untrained eye, it may look random, beautiful, yes, but chaotic. Yet to navigators, each star had a purpose. Each constellation was a marker. The sky itself was a compass. They noticed something simple but profound. While most stars rose in the east and set in the west, a few seemed steady, fixed in their place. In the northern hemisphere, that star was Polaris, the North Star. Unlike others, it barely shifted in the sky. It became a constant reference, pointing north with unwavering reliability. For sailors, Polaris was a lifeline. With it, they could orient themselves, even in the middle of vast oceans. But Polaris wasn't alone in guiding travelers. Entire constellations became signposts in the night. One of the most famous constellations is Orion, the Hunter. His belt, 3 stars in a neat row, was easy to spot, even for those with little experience. For many cultures, Orion wasn't just a myth but a practical marker. His rising signaled the coming of winter in the northern hemisphere, while his setting marked spring. To sailors, Orion's position could tell them both time of year and direction. The Polynesians, for example, memorized hundreds of star paths, and Orion's belt was among them. It wasn't just a hunter in the sky, it was a compass point, a clock, and a friend on long journeys. For navigators in the southern hemisphere, another constellation took center stage, Crux, also known as the Southern Cross. Its bright stars formed a cross-shaped figure that pointed reliably toward the South Pole. Polynesian navigators, Aboriginal Australians, and many others used it to steer across the southern oceans. The Southern Cross was more than a direction finder. It was woven into stories and traditions, teaching each new generation how to navigate not just by logic, but by memory and meaning. Another famous cluster was the Pleiades, also called the Seven Sisters. This small, shimmering group of stars was known across the world, from Greece to Japan to the Pacific Islands. Sailors used it to mark seasons and directions. In Hawaii, the rising of the Pleiades marked the start of the Makahiki season, a time of rest and celebration. For Greek sailors, the Pleiades rising in the dawn sky warned of the coming stormy season. In both cases, this little cluster of stars wasn't just decoration, it was information. Navigators didn't just look at stars, they memorized where those stars appeared on the horizon. They knew exactly where each constellation rose and set, creating what we might call a star compass. For Polynesians, this star compass was vast and detailed. They divided the horizon into houses, each aligned with a star's rising or setting point. By memorizing these houses, navigators could sail in nearly any direction with confidence. At night, they steered toward the star rising where they wanted to go. When that star dipped below the horizon, they switched to another in the same path. In this way, they could travel thousands of miles, guided only by the sky. Imagine how this felt. Sailing across open ocean, no land in sight, and yet feeling certain of your course because the stars themselves whispered the way. The word planet comes from the Greek word planetes, meaning wanderer. Unlike the fixed stars, planets moved across the sky, shifting night after night. At first, this made them mysterious. But over time, navigators learned to use them too. Venus, often the brightest star in the sky, appeared either just before sunrise or just after sunset. Sailors called it the morning star or the evening star. Its brilliance made it a reliable marker of direction. Mars, with its reddish glow, stood out clearly, while Jupiter and Saturn, slower but steady, offered additional reference points. By blending the fixed map of stars with the wandering lights of planets, navigators had a rich tapestry of guides. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. To truly remember all these stars, sailors wrapped them in stories. Constellations became heroes, monsters, gods, and myths. The stories weren't just entertainment, they were memory tools. For example, a navigator might teach a child that Orion the Hunter chased the Pleiades sisters across the sky. The tale gave life to the stars, making them easier to recall. Another might say that the Southern Cross pointed the way home, a story that kept sailors comforted during long voyages. The sky wasn't just a map. It was a library filled with lessons disguised as legends. The night sky also acted as a clock. By observing which constellations rose at certain times of year, sailors could track seasons. This mattered for more than direction. It told them when storms might arrive, when trade winds would shift, and when harvests on land were ready. For example, Mediterranean sailors knew that the rising of the star Sirius in summer signaled the hottest days of the year. In fact, that's where we get the phrase, the dog days of summer. Sirius was part of the constellation Canis Major, the Great Dog. What's striking is that across the world, people saw the same stars but told different stories. Greeks imagined hunters and heroes, Polynesians saw canoes and fishhooks. Egyptians aligned their pyramids to Orion's belt, Aboriginal. Australians wove stories of ancestral spirits. And yet, no matter the culture, the result was the same. The stars guided human beings across water and land, connecting our species to both earth and sky. Pause for a moment. Imagine yourself lying back on the deck of a quiet canoe, the waves gentle, the stars infinite. The air smells of salt and night. Somewhere nearby, a navigator hums a chant, reciting star names in an ancient language. Each name, each melody, is a breadcrumb across the sky, leading the way forward. There is no fear, only trust. Trust in the stars, trust in tradition, trust in the rhythm of the universe. This is what it means to use the night sky as a map, not just to know facts, but to feel connected to something vast, eternal, and kind. Even now, with GPS satellites circling the globe, the stars remain a timeless guide. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station have used them for orientation. Sailors still train in celestial navigation, both as tradition and as backup in case technology fails. The night sky has not changed. Orion still rises, the Pleiades still sparkle, Polaris still points north. The same map that guided the first voyagers remains above us, waiting for anyone who dares to look up. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth. We are not separate from those first navigators. When we look at the stars, we share their map, their wonder, their dreams. So tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, let the constellations be let the night sky itself cradle you, guiding you through sleep just as it guided our ancestors across the sea. For every sailor in the northern hemisphere, there has always been one star more trusted than all the others. It doesn't rise in the east and set in the west like its neighbors. It doesn't wander across the heavens like the planets. Instead, it stays fixed, steady, a faithful sentinel in the night sky. That star is Polaris, the North Star. For thousands of years, it has been the most reliable guide for travelers, a point of light that whispers, "Here is north, here is home, here is certainty in a world of shifting seas." If you stand on a northern shore and watch the night sky for hours, you'll notice something. The stars wheel slowly overhead, tracing wide arcs. Constellations rise and set, the moon drifts, the planets wander. But Polaris stays almost exactly in one place, perched near the North Celestial Pole. This immobility is what made it so precious to navigators. By finding Polaris, a sailor could instantly know the direction of north. With north established, east, south, and west followed. A ship adrift in the middle of a dark ocean could regain its bearings simply by spotting this steadfast star. Imagine being on a Phoenician ship, far from shore, the sea stretching endlessly around you. The waves are restless, the winds uncertain. But above, Polaris waits unshaken. You lift your eyes and know immediately where you are facing. In a world of uncertainty, this star was a promise of order. Not only did Polaris point north, it also revealed latitude, how far north or south a sailor was. The trick was simple yet profound. The angle of Polaris above the horizon matched the observer's latitude. For example, if you stood at the equator, Polaris would hover just at the horizon, barely visible. At 30 degrees north latitude, say, in Egypt, Polaris would sit 30 degrees above the horizon. At 45 degrees, it would rise higher still. And if you stood at the North Pole, Polaris would shine directly overhead. This meant sailors could estimate their position north or south just by measuring Polaris's height. Even with crude instruments, a stick, a hand stretched at arm's length, or later tools. Like the astrolabe, navigators could orient themselves with remarkable accuracy. Think about that. Centuries before satellites, before compasses, before even maps were widely available, the heavens themselves offered a built-in system of navigation. Polaris wasn't only a tool, it was also wrapped in myth and story. To the Norse, it was called the Leiðarstjörna, or guiding star. It was the light that led Viking longships across stormy seas to distant shores. In other traditions, Polaris was seen as the hub of the sky, the nail around which the heavens turned. Ancient Chinese astronomers called it the Emperor Star, believing it to be the seat of the celestial emperor, around which all other stars circled in obedience. To many cultures, Polaris wasn't just a marker of direction. It was a symbol of constancy, of leadership, of faithfulness. While the world changed below, while seas shifted and storms raged, Polaris remained fixed, unchanging, eternal. Even in more recent centuries, Polaris carried symbolic weight. In the United States during the 19th century, enslaved African Americans used the North Star as a literal guide to freedom. Songs like Follow the Drinking Gourd carried coded instructions, pointing fugitives toward the north where slavery was outlawed. For them, Polaris wasn't only a tool of navigation. It was hope itself, shining above the darkness of oppression. It was a reminder that no matter how long the journey, freedom lay in the direction of the North Star. Over time, navigators developed instruments to measure Polaris's height more precisely. The astrolabe, perfected by Islamic scholars, allowed sailors to calculate latitude with accuracy. Later came the cross staff and the sextant, tools that made celestial navigation even more reliable. Yet even with these instruments, the principle was the same. Find Polaris, measure its angle, and you know both direction and position. All other tools were refinements of a truth already present in the night sky. Interestingly, Polaris hasn't always been the perfect North Star. Because of a slow wobble in Earth's axis, called precession, the star at the celestial pole changes over thousands of years. About 5,000 years ago, the North Star wasn't Polaris at all, but a star called Thuban in the constellation Draco. In about 12,000 years, another star, Vega, will take Polaris's place. But for us, in this age, Polaris shines almost exactly at the pole, close enough to appear fixed, close enough to serve as the great guide. There's something poetic in this. Even the most steadfast star changes over the span of millennia. And yet, for our slice of history, Polaris has been the eternal guide. Imagine yourself again, lying on the deck of a small ship at night. The water is black and endless. The wind is uncertain. You feel small, fragile. But then you look up and see Polaris, steady and true. A sense of calm settles over you. No matter the waves, no matter the distance from shore, you are not lost. This was the gift Polaris gave to countless sailors, not just direction, but peace of mind. It was an anchor in the heavens, a reminder that even in chaos there was order. Even in uncertainty, there was guidance. Even today, with advanced technology, Polaris remains important. Sailors still learn celestial navigation as a backup in case electronics fail. Hikers, campers, and stargazers use it to orient themselves. And for dreamers and poets, Polaris continues to symbolize constancy and hope. Astronauts aboard spacecraft have used stars, including Polaris, to confirm orientation. Imagine leaving Earth itself and still turning to the same guiding light that led Viking ships and Phoenician traders. The legacy of Polaris extends from ancient canoes to modern space capsules. Perhaps that's why the North Star still captivates us. It is more than a point of light. It is a symbol that transcends time and culture. It tells us that guidance is always available if we know where to look. It reminds us that constancy exists even in a shifting world. For sailors, it meant survival. For the oppressed, it meant freedom. For dreamers, it means inspiration. Polaris is not just a star in the sky, it is a star in the human story. So let us rest in that thought as this chapter closes. Picture Polaris shining above, steady and calm, its light reaching across centuries, across cultures, across seas. Feel its presence not only as a navigator's. Long before satellites or compasses, long before ships with sails or maps on parchment, there were the navigators of the Pacific, the Polynesians. Their voyages stretched across thousands of miles of open ocean, connecting tiny islands scattered like jewels in the world's largest sea. To modern minds, such journeys might seem impossible. How could anyone cross such vast distances without instruments, without charts? And yet, the Polynesians did. They mastered an art so deep, so intuitive that, even today, it inspires awe. That art is known as wayfinding. The Pacific Ocean is enormous. It covers more area than all of Earth's land combined. To cross it without modern tools would seem like a gamble with fate. But to the Polynesians, it was not a void. It was a pathway, alive with signs, signals, and rhythms that could be read as clearly as words on a page. Their double-hulled canoes, called waka or vaca, were masterpieces of design, sturdy, swift, and capable of carrying families, supplies, and hope. These canoes weren't built to hug coastlines. They were built to cross open ocean, to vanish beyond the horizon and find land again on the far side. To sail into the Pacific with only the sky and sea as guides wasn't madness. It was tradition. At the heart of wayfinding was the star compass. The Polynesians memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars along the horizon. Each point had a name. Each name carried a direction. Imagine standing at sea as night falls. The horizon becomes a circle of darkness, and above it the stars appear, one by one. To most people, it looks overwhelming. To a wayfinder, it looks organized. They know exactly where Sirius rises, where Orion's belt appears, where the Pleiades cluster sets. As a canoe sailed, the navigator steered toward the rising star in the direction they wished to go. When that star dipped below the horizon, they shifted to the next in the sequence. In this way, they followed a path of stars, a celestial trail across the ocean. It wasn't random memorization. It was a living map, chanted and sung, passed down from master to apprentice. The sky was their compass, and memory was their chart. But wayfinding wasn't only about the stars. The ocean itself spoke. Polynesian navigators studied the swell patterns, the way waves moved across the surface. Even when the sky was cloudy, even when stars were hidden, the swells remained. By feeling the roll of the canoe, by sensing the push of waves, wayfinders could tell direction. They knew that one swell came from the trade winds, steady and reliable, while another might bounce back from a distant island. The meeting of swells revealed information invisible to outsiders. To us, it may seem like magic. To them, it was skill honed over generations. As canoes neared land, wayfinders looked for other signs. Certain seabirds only flew a set distance from shore. By watching their flight paths, navigators knew where to follow. Clouds, too, carried meaning. Some formed patterns over islands because of rising air currents. The color of the water shifted from deep navy to turquoise, hinting at reefs below. Even drifting logs or floating plants suggested that land was near. Nothing was overlooked. Every ripple, every bird, every cloud became part of the navigator's knowledge. Wayfinding wasn't just a technique, it was spiritual. Navigators were deeply respected, often trained from childhood. They memorized thousands of details, star positions, chants, traditions, not just with their minds but with their hearts. For Polynesians, voyaging was a conversation with the ocean and the sky. The navigator wasn't commanding the sea but listening to it, aligning with its rhythms. Some described it as seeing with the whole body. The canoe became an extension of the self, moving as one with the waves. With these skills, Polynesians settled islands across the Pacific. From Hawaii in the north to Aotearoa, New Zealand in the south, to Easter Island in the east, all were reached centuries before Europeans even dared cross similar distances. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate voyages guided by wayfinding. Imagine the courage it took to leave a small island, sail into endless blue, and trust the stars and waves to lead you to a new home. Yet again and again, they succeeded. Their journeys expanded human presence across one-third of the planet. For centuries, the tradition of wayfinding was passed orally, master to apprentice. But when Western explorers arrived with compasses and charts, the old ways began to fade. Some Polynesian communities lost the knowledge entirely. Yet the art was not forgotten. In the 20th century, navigators like Malpiailug of Micronesia and Nainoa Thompson of Hawaii revived wayfinding, teaching new generations. Voyages aboard the canoe Hokula in the 1970s and beyond proved that the ancient methods still worked. The canoe sailed thousands of miles, guided only by the stars, reaffirming the genius of Polynesian navigation. Today, wayfinding is honored not only as a cultural treasure, but as one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. Close your eyes and picture it. You are on a double-hulled canoe in the middle of the Pacific. The waves rise and fall in steady rhythm. The stars glitter above, endless and bright. A master navigator stands at the stern, chanting softly, eyes fixed on the horizon. You feel the swell beneath you, the shift of the canoe, the whisper of the wind. You realize that everything is connected: sky, sea, and soul. There are no engines, no maps, no electronics. And yet you are not lost. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Guided by memory, by nature, by tradition, you are sailing in harmony with the universe. What can we learn from Polynesian wayfinding today? That navigation is more than science. It is relationship. It is trust in the patterns of nature, in the wisdom of ancestors, in the connection between human beings and the world around them. When we look up at the stars, we share the same map they did. When we feel the rhythm of the ocean, we echo their voyages. And when we dare to journey into the unknown, we carry their spirit within us. Wayfinding reminds us that the world is full of signs, waiting to be read. That guidance is everywhere if we learn to pay attention. And that sometimes, the greatest technology is not a device in our hand, but a story in our memory, a chant on our lips, and a trust in the stars. As this chapter draws to a close, let the rhythm of Polynesian chants echo in your mind. Picture the canoe gliding across endless waves, the stars above steady and kind. Feel the calm that comes from knowing that even in the vastest ocean, you are guided. The Polynesians trusted the sea and the sky. And tonight, as you drift into dreams, you too can trust the night, trust the journey, trust that you are carried safely toward dawn. The story of navigation is not only one of canoes on the Pacific or traders in Phoenician ships. It is also the story of the great civilizations that flourished around the Mediterranean, the Greeks and the Romans. These cultures stood at the crossroads of myth and science, philosophy and practicality. For them, the sea was both a stage for trade and conquest and a laboratory for ideas. And in the night sky, they found a teacher. The Mediterranean Sea is not as vast as the Pacific, but for the Greeks and Romans, it was the heart of their world. Its waters connected city-states, empires, and distant lands. Ships carried olives, wine, grain, and marble. They carried soldiers and philosophers, myths and mathematics. But to cross the Mediterranean was never simple. Storms, shifting winds, and hidden reefs made each voyage uncertain. And so sailors looked upward, to the same stars that Polynesians, Egyptians, and Phoenicians had studied. Yet the Greeks and Romans brought something unique to this ancient art. They tried to explain it. They asked not only how the stars could guide, but why they moved as they did. For the Greeks, the constellations were alive with stories. Orion was a mighty hunter, placed in the heavens by Zeus. Cassiopeia was a vain queen, punished to circle the sky upside down. Perseus, Andromeda, Pegasus, all these figures shimmered above, turning the night into a stage of legends. These myths gave sailors a way to remember the stars, but they also gave meaning to their journeys. To set sail under the gaze of gods and heroes was to step into a story larger than oneself. Each constellation wasn't just a tool for direction. It was a companion, a reminder that the sea was threaded into the fabric of the cosmos. But alongside myth came curiosity. The Greeks were among the first to treat the sky as a puzzle to be solved. Philosophers like Thales of Miletus noticed that the Little Bear constellation, Ursa Minor, could help sailors steer more precisely than the Great Bear, Ursa Major. This small insight was revolutionary. It showed that observation, not just tradition, could improve navigation. Later, Hipparchus of Nicaea, one of the greatest astronomers of the ancient world, created a star catalog with over 800 entries. He measured the positions of stars with remarkable accuracy and even discovered the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis. For sailors, his work meant greater confidence. The sky was no longer only myth, it was measurable. Greek sailors began experimenting with tools to make use of this knowledge. The gnomon, a simple stick casting a shadow, helped measure the sun's height. Later, devices like the astrolabe allowed them to calculate the altitude of stars. Though primitive by today's standards, these instruments turned the heavens into a navigational chart. Imagine a Greek sailor, standing on the deck of a trireme, holding up an astrolabe as the ship rocks gently. The bronze disc catches the starlight. Through its markings, the sailor measures the angle of Polaris, confirming their latitude. The tool is simple, but the principle is eternal. The sky offers knowledge to those who ask. The Romans inherited much from the Greeks, including their astronomy. But the Romans were more practical than philosophical. For them, the stars were useful not for wonder but for order. Rome's power rested not only on its legions, but also on its ability to move goods, people, and armies across the Mediterranean. Roman ships carried grain from Egypt to feed the city of Rome, timber from Gaul, spices from the east. To keep this vast network flowing, sailors relied on both experience and the heavens. Roman writers recorded sailing calendars, noting which constellations marked safe or dangerous seasons. For instance, the rising of Arcturus signaled storms. The appearance of the Pleiades meant the time for sailing had arrived. These observations were not just superstition. They were practical guides, written into handbooks for merchants and captains. What made Greek and Roman astronomy unique was the way it blended myth, philosophy, and practicality. To a sailor, Orion's belt might be a direction marker, while to a philosopher, it was evidence of cosmic order. To a poet, the constellations were metaphors for fate, while to a general, they were schedules for. The stars served many masters, gods, thinkers, traders, soldiers, and in serving them, they tied human life to the vastness of the universe. Picture it now, a Roman grain ship, heavy with cargo, sailing from Alexandria to Rome. The Mediterranean stretches dark around it. The crew is weary, the waves restless. At the stern, a navigator watches the stars. He knows that the appearance of the Pleiades signals the season of safe passage. He checks Polaris, steady in the north, and steers. Accordingly, above him, Cassiopeia tilts, Orion rises, and Arcturus blinks. To him, these are not distant myths. They are instructions, written in light. He feels connected not only to his ship, but to the entire cosmos. He is part of a chain, from Phoenicians before him to future sailors yet unborn, all guided by the same eternal map. The influence of Greek and Roman astronomy didn't vanish with their empires. Their writings were preserved by scholars in the Islamic Golden Age, translated, expanded, and eventually passed to medieval Europe. The astrolabe, perfected by Islamic scientists, was built on Greek principles. The star catalogues of Hipparchus influenced future generations of astronomers. Even today, many of the constellations we know bear Greek names. Andromeda, Pegasus, Orion, Cassiopeia. Their myths, their philosophies, and their observations shaped the way we see the sky. For sailors, the legacy is clear. The Greeks and Romans turned the heavens into a blend of story and science. They proved that the stars could be both poetry and mathematics, both myth and map. As this chapter closes, imagine the Mediterranean at midnight. The waves lap gently against the hull of a ship. Above, constellations blaze in clarity. Somewhere, a philosopher wonders about the harmony of the cosmos, while a sailor checks his bearings by Polaris. Two different minds, two different purposes, yet both guided by the same stars. That is the gift of Greek and Roman astronomy. It united myth and reason, heart and mind, sea and sky. So as you drift deeper into rest, think of those ancient mariners and thinkers. Think of how they looked at the heavens not just for direction, but for meaning. Let their calm curiosity guide you into dreams where the stars still shine, steady and eternal. The story of navigation is a tapestry woven across civilizations, and one of its brightest threads shines from the Islamic Golden Age. Between the 8th and 14th centuries, while much of Europe struggled through turmoil, scholars in cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba lit lanterns of learning. They studied medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and most of all, the heavens. For sailors of the Islamic world, these advances transformed the art of navigation, turning the night sky into even clearer guide. By the 9th century, the Islamic Caliphate stretched from Spain to India. Within their borders lay deserts, mountains, and vast seas. Trade was the empire's lifeblood. Caravans across the Silk Road, ships across the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean. These weren't short coastal hops. Arab and Persian sailors crossed huge distances, linking Africa with India, China, and beyond. To travel safely, they needed precision. The stars had always been trusted, but now they were studied with scientific rigor. Perhaps the most iconic tool of this era was the astrolabe. While the Greeks had invented its basic form, it was Islamic scholars who refined it into a marvel of precision. The astrolabe was a brass disc etched with intricate markings, a handheld model of the heavens. By aligning it with the sun or a star, sailors could measure altitude and calculate latitude. With practice, they could determine time of night, position on Earth, and even predict the movement of stars. Picture a sailor aboard a dhow in the Indian Ocean, the canvas sail filled with monsoon winds. The navigator lifts an astrolabe to the sky, its metal cool in his hand. He sights Polaris, measures its height above the horizon, and notes the angle. That single measurement tells him how far north or south he is. On a sea without landmarks, it is nothing short of magic. The Islamic Golden Age was fueled not only by sailors, but also by scholars in great centers of knowledge. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad gathered texts from Greece, India, and Persia, translating and expanding them. Astronomers like al-Battani refined measurements of the sun and moon. Al-Sufi cataloged stars with clarity that surpassed even Hipparchus. Later, Ibn Yunus developed astronomical tables so precise they were used for centuries. These weren't ivory tower pursuits. Their work spilled into the decks of ships, guiding captains across oceans. Every observation, every calculation, every star chart became a lifeline for trade and exploration. During this era, another tool arrived, the magnetic compass. Likely invented in China, it spread westward through trade. By the 13th century, Islamic sailors were blending compass readings with celestial navigation. Imagine the combination: a compass pointing steady north, an astrolabe measuring Polaris, and a star chart memorized by heart. Together, they created a navigation system unmatched in the world. Arab sailors became masters of the Indian Ocean, riding the powerful monsoon winds. They knew when the winds would shift, when it was safe to leave, and when storms threatened. The stars above told them where they were, while the winds and waves carried them forward. These voyages connected cultures. Spices from India, ivory from Africa, porcelain from China all moved along these routes. But more than goods, ideas traveled. mathematics, astronomy, religion, and art. The ocean became not only a marketplace but a classroom. If you've ever looked at a star chart today, you may have noticed that many stars carry Arabic names: Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Rigel, Vega, Altair. This is the legacy of Islamic astronomers. They cataloged and named stars with such care that their terms spread worldwide. Think of it: when a modern astronomer observes Vega through a telescope, they whisper a name first spoken in Arabic 1,000 years ago. When a sailor checks Rigel on the horizon, they carry forward a tradition that began under desert skies. For Islamic scholars, the stars were not only tools, they were symbols of beauty and divine order. The Quran itself speaks of the stars as guides, placed by God to lead travelers by land and sea. To study the heavens was to study the mind of the Creator. This spiritual reverence infused their science with wonder. Charts weren't just practical, they were works of art. Instruments weren't only tools, they were expressions of harmony. In their hands, navigation became not just survival, but poetry. Imagine again, it is the 11th century. A dhow sails from Oman toward India. The deck creaks, the sail billows. The navigator kneels with his astrolabe, aligning it to the stars. Nearby, a young apprentice watches, closely memorizing each step. The sea is dark, the horizon invisible, but above, Vega shines bright, Altair blinks, Aldebaran glows red. The navigator murmurs their names, ancient and familiar. He charts their rise and fall, and with confidence declares their latitude. The crew relaxes. They are not lost. They are guided by knowledge passed down through centuries, refined by scholars, confirmed by stars. The contributions of the Islamic Golden Age shaped navigation for centuries. European explorers of the Age of Discovery, Columbus, Magellan, da Gama, all relied on instruments and tables developed in the Islamic world. Without those tools, their voyages would have been impossible. Even today, the legacy remains. Astronomical terms, mathematical concepts, even the very idea of using precise instruments to read the heavens, all bear the imprint of this golden age. As this chapter closes, let yourself drift into the rhythm of those ancient voyages. Picture the Indian Ocean at night, stars reflected in calm waters, a dhow rocking gently under the monsoon wind. Hear the quiet murmur of the navigator naming the stars. Feel the comfort of knowing that the heavens are steady and kind. The Islamic Golden Age gave sailors not only tools, but trust that the universe could be measured, understood, and followed. And tonight, you too can rest in that trust. The stars above are constant. The journey is guided. The sea of sleep is waiting, calm, and endless. The north is a place of fierce beauty, rugged coastlines, icy waters, and skies that shift between endless daylight in summer and long darkness in winter. For most, these lands would seem too harsh to produce great sailors. And yet, out of Scandinavia came the Vikings, master mariners who carved their dragon-headed ships through the cold seas and reached farther than most thought possible. From the 8th to the 11th centuries, Viking longships sailed out of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Sleek, swift, and shallow-drafted, these ships could handle the open ocean as easily as winding rivers. They allowed the Vikings to raid distant coasts, yes, but also to establish trade routes stretching from Russia to Byzantium, from Britain to Baghdad. The sea was not a barrier for them. It was their highway, but northern seas were dangerous. Clouds often obscured the sun, storms rolled in. Without warning, the days of winter were short and the nights long. How could Viking navigators find their way in such conditions? Like other ancient sailors, Vikings relied on keen observation of nature. They watched the flight of seabirds, the color of the water, the drift of seaweed. They memorized currents and swells, learning which directions they flowed with the seasons. But most of all, they used the sun. In clear weather, its position told them direction. By noon, they could estimate latitude by measuring its height in the sky. But what about cloudy days when the sun was hidden? This is where the legend of the sunstone comes in. Medieval sagas tell of Vikings using solarstein, or sunstones, to locate the sun even when clouds or fog obscured it. For centuries, historians debated whether this was myth or fact. Then, scientists discovered that certain crystals, such as Iceland spar, a form of calcite, can indeed polarize light. When you hold such a crystal to the sky and rotate it, you see patterns that reveal the sun's position, even if it's hidden. Imagine a Viking navigator lifting a translucent stone, tilting it until the light aligns, and then pointing confidently. There, the sun is there. That is west. Whether every Viking ship carried sunstones, we cannot know for sure, but the possibility shows just how advanced and resourceful these sailors were. They weren't reckless barbarians at sea, they were careful, observant, and skilled. Using their methods, the Vikings sailed farther than most people of their age thought possible. Around the year 870, they colonized Iceland, navigating hundreds of miles across open ocean. From there, they pushed onward to Greenland, establishing settlements on its frozen coast. Picture that journey: weeks at sea, the water icy, storms constant, and yet a longship presses forward. The crew rows when the wind fails. The navigator checks the horizon for birds, the sunstone for the hidden sun. At last, green cliffs rise in the distance, a new world reached through skill and persistence. Even more astonishing, around the year 1000, Vikings sailed west from Greenland and reached the coast of North America, a place they called Vinland. This was nearly 500 years before Columbus. Archaeological remains at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland prove that Viking explorers landed there, built houses, and lived for a time before returning home. Think of it: Norsemen standing on North American soil, guided not by compasses or maps, but by memory, courage, and perhaps a shimmering crystal. They were the first Europeans to see the New World, long before it became part of recorded history. Of course, the Vikings also relied on the stars. In the northern sky, Polaris, the North Star, was a constant companion. They aligned their ships with it, just as Phoenicians and Arabs had done. Constellations like Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, helped point the way. But in high latitudes, the stars sometimes dipped low, or the nights were too short in summer. The Vikings had to blend every method available: sun, stars, waves, birds, and stones. Their genius lay in combining them. All the Viking voyages were not just about plunder. They were about curiosity. Each new land opened possibilities: grazing fields, trade routes, alliances. Their settlements in Iceland and Greenland became permanent. Even in Vinland, far from home, they sought to build something new. What drove them? Perhaps the same restless spirit that drives us still, the urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. The Vikings were not content to stay in fjords. They needed to test the sea, to challenge the unknown. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a Viking longship cutting through cold waves. Its prow rises and falls, the dragon head snarling into the mist. The crew sings to keep rhythm as oars dip into the dark water. Overhead, the clouds shift, and a navigator lifts a crystal, sunstone catching a faint glow. He nods, adjusts the tiller, and the ship veers slightly west. For days the ocean stretches endless. The men grow weary, but then gulls appear circling. The navigator smiles, land is near. And soon, dark cliffs loom, covered in green moss, Iceland or Greenland or perhaps Vinland itself. This is not fantasy. This is history, written in sagas and confirmed in ruins. The Vikings truly reached beyond their world, farther than almost anyone else of their time. The Viking Age eventually faded, but their legacy endured. Their techniques influenced later sailors. Their courage inspired myths and legends. And their journeys remind us that navigation is not just about tools. It is about daring, observation, and faith in the natural world. Even today, scientists study sunstones and marvel at how such a simple crystal could guide men across oceans. And modern sailors retrace Viking roots, proving again and again that with the right knowledge, those journeys were possible. As this chapter closes, think of those longships rocking gently on northern waves. Think of the songs of sailors, the glint of crystals, the steady gaze of Polaris. The Vikings were more than warriors. They were voyagers, guided by sky and sea, carving paths into the unknown. And tonight, as you drift into dreams, imagine yourself aboard one of those ships, wrapped in fur against the cold, lulled by the rhythm of oars and waves. Let the northern seas carry you gently. As the stars and the sunstone point the way toward rest for thousands of years, sailors had trusted the sky. They memorized the rise of stars, the setting of constellations, the height of the sun at noon. They felt the push of waves, studied the habits of birds, and read clouds like scripture. But then, a small piece of iron. The magnetic compass, simple, unassuming, and revolutionary, joined the sailor's toolkit. It did not erase the old ways of wayfinding. Instead, it blended with them, reshaping the art of navigation forever. This chapter tells the story of how that tiny needle, guided invisibly by Earth itself, transformed journeys across the seas. The compass began far from the oceans, in ancient China during the Han Dynasty. Early compasses weren't designed for ships at all. They were tools for fortune-telling, for aligning buildings with the flow of energy or qi. These first devices used lodestone, a naturally magnetic mineral floating on water or suspended by silk. But by the 11th century, Chinese sailors realized something remarkable. A magnetized needle always pointed north. At sea, where the horizon swallowed all landmarks, this discovery was priceless. The compass became not just a mystical charm, but a navigator's friend. From China, the idea spread westward along the Silk Road, reaching the Islamic world and eventually medieval Europe. By the 13th century, sailors across the Mediterranean and Atlantic were using compasses to steer their ships. For centuries, navigation had depended on the sky. But the compass worked in conditions when the stars and sun could not be seen. Imagine sailing under thick clouds or in fog so heavy you can barely see the bow of your ship. Imagine long Arctic nights when the sun does not rise or stormy seas that hide every celestial guide. The compass pierced through uncertainty. Its quiet needle pointed north no matter what. This reliability gave sailors new courage. They could venture farther from land, sail at night, or cross cloudy seas without fear of drifting hopelessly off course. The world, once bounded by the limits of starlight, opened wider. But here is the fascinating truth: the compass did not replace the stars. Instead, it joined them. Medieval and Renaissance sailors often used both together. At night, they checked their course by the constellations. By day, or in cloudy weather, they turned to the compass. When one system faltered, the other carried them through. In fact, early compasses weren't always perfectly accurate. They pointed to magnetic north, not true north. Without corrections, they could lead sailors astray. The stars remained the standard, the trusted teachers. The compass was a backup, a partner. This marriage of old and new created resilience. Navigation was no longer bound to a single method, but became a symphony of techniques. With compass in hand, European sailors dared voyages that once seemed impossible. In the 15th century, Portuguese explorers like Prince Henry, the Navigator, pushed down the coast of Africa, mapping lands no European had seen before. Soon after, Christopher Columbus sailed west, guided by both stars and compass, reaching the Americas. Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope, opening sea routes to India. Ferdinand Magellan circumnavigated the globe. All of these journeys were made possible by the compass. Not because it worked alone, but because it allowed sailors to trust themselves when the sky failed. It gave confidence, a quiet reassurance that the ship was on course. Beyond its practicality, the compass took on symbolic power. To hold a compass was to hold control over uncertainty. Sailors began to see it as more than a tool. It was a charm against being lost, a steady reminder that direction exists even in chaos. Writers and poets later embraced the image of the compass as a metaphor for guidance, love, and destiny. Just as stars had once been wrapped in myth, the compass too became part of human imagination. Close your eyes and picture it. The year is 1492. Columbus stands on the deck of the Santa Maria. Clouds blot out the stars. The sea is restless, the crew anxious. In his hand, Columbus holds a compass. He watches the needle quiver, then steady, pointing north. It does not solve every fear. It does not calm the waves, but it gives him certainty. They are still on course, even in darkness. The crew exhales, reassured by the quiet authority of that little needle. This is the gift of the compass, not grandeur, not poetry, but steadiness, a whisper of direction in the unknown. From the 13th century onward, no serious ship sailed without a compass. It became as essential as sails or anchors. Over time, designs improved. Needles were balanced on pins, housed in protective boxes, marked with cardinal directions. Mariners added corrections for magnetic variation. By the time of the great naval powers, Spain, Portugal, England, the compass was the heartbeat of exploration. Without it, the mapping of the world would have been far slower, far riskier. Even today, though GPS satellites beam positions to our phones, compasses remain. Hikers carry them, ships still keep them, pilots rely on them. Why? Because the compass is simple, unbreakable, eternal. It connects us to Earth's magnetic field, a natural guide that asks nothing but attention. As this chapter closes, think of the marriage of stars and compass. One ancient, eternal, glowing above. The other new, precise, resting in the hand. Together, they guided sailors across oceans, into new lands, into the shaping of history. And tonight, let that same partnership guide you inward. The stars of memory above, the compass of the heart within. Both steady, both kind, both pointing you safely toward rest. By the dawn of the 15th century, the world felt larger than ever. Oceans stretched like endless barriers, and maps ended with monsters painted at the edges. But sailors were restless. Kingdoms hungered for trade, for gold, for glory. And with the compass steady in their hands, the stars glittering above, and centuries of inherited knowledge behind them, they began a new chapter in the story of navigation. This was the age of exploration, when men dared to cross oceans no European had. Seen when coastlines were redrawn, when the unknown became known. It was an age of courage and conquest, of discovery and destruction, of dreams fulfilled and nightmares awakened. Before this age, much of the world was still hidden from European eyes. They knew the Mediterranean, parts of Africa, the Middle East, and scattered tailies from the Silk Road. But the Atlantic Ocean was another matter. Beyond the Canary Islands, the horizon seemed to stretch into infinity. Some feared there was nothing there at all, and yet whispers traveled. Stories of lands across the sea, of riches waiting to be found, of routes to Asia by water. The stars had long offered guidance, and now the compass gave courage. The pieces were in place. It was Portugal, a small nation at the edge of Europe, that first embraced the ocean. Under the patronage of Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese sailors pushed farther down the coast of Africa. They mapped rivers, charted winds, and learned the rhythm of the Atlantic. Each voyage added a piece to the puzzle. They discovered the Azores, the Cape Verde Islands, and in time rounded the treacherous Cape of Good Hope. Suddenly, the sea was no longer a wall, but a road to India, to spices and silks, to wealth beyond imagining. Then came Christopher Columbus, sailing not south but west. In 1492, with 3 small ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, he crossed the Atlantic. For weeks there was only ocean. The crew grew restless, fearful, but Columbus, watching both compass and stars, kept faith. When land finally appeared, it was not Asia as he hoped, but the Caribbean. Yet his voyage cracked the barrier of the Atlantic. The New World was revealed, and history shifted forever. Others followed. Vasco da Gama reached India by sea. Cabral touched Brazil. And then, in 1519, Ferdinand Magellan embarked on the greatest voyage of all, the circumnavigation of the globe. Though Magellan himself would not survive the journey, his fleet proved what many had doubted, that Earth was round and that its oceans were interconnected. For the first time, the full scope of the planet became real, tangible, undeniable. These explorers carried with them the accumulated wisdom of centuries. They used the compass for direction, the astrolabe to measure the stars, the cross-staff to calculate latitude. They relied on sailing charts, called portolan maps, filled with painstaking details of coastlines, and always they turned to the heavens. Polaris for the north, the Southern Cross for the south, the sun for midday. They were not alone. Every voyage built upon the work of Polynesian wayfinders, Arab astronomers, Viking sailors. The age of exploration was not born from nothing. It was the flowering of a long tradition. But this age was not only triumph. With the ships came conquest. Indigenous peoples across the Americas, Africa, and Asia felt the violence of colonization. Trade became entangled with slavery, war, and greed. The same ships that carried explorers also carried suffering. This truth, too, belongs to the story of navigation. The sea brought connection, but also collision. It brought knowledge, but also exploitation. To honor history, we must hold both realities, the wonder of discovery and the shadows it cast. Close your eyes. Imagine standing on the deck of a caravel, the Atlantic stretching in every direction. The sail billows above, the wood creaks beneath your feet. The compass needle glows faintly in the lantern light. Overhead, the stars blaze, Orion to the south, Polaris to the north, the Milky Way spilling across the sky like a river of light. The crew murmurs prayers. They wonder if they will ever see land again. But you, the navigator, trust the tools in your hands, the map in your memory, the stars above. You are not lost. You are part of a story unfolding, one that will change the world. By the 16th century, the maps of Europe were transformed. Coastlines of Africa, Asia, and the Americas filled their pages. The oceans were no longer barriers, but highways of empire. Navigation had advanced from myth and memory to science and precision. And yet, the stars remained. Even with compasses, charts, and instruments, sailors still looked upward each night. The heavens had been the first guide, and they never lost their place. As this chapter closes, think of the great voyages of the age of exploration. Think of caravels crossing unknown seas, of compasses steady in rough storms, of stars shining constant in strange skies. Think of the courage and the cost, the discoveries and the consequences. The age of exploration was not just about maps. It was about human spirit, the restless urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. It was about trust. Trust in tools, in knowledge, in the possibility that the world was. As this chapter closes, think of the great voyages of the age of exploration. Think of caravels crossing unknown seas, of compasses steady in rough storms, of stars shining constant in strange skies. Think of the courage and the cost, the discoveries and the consequences. The age of exploration was not just about maps. It was about human spirit, the restless urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. It was about trust. Trust in tools, in knowledge, in the possibility that the world was larger and richer than anyone imagined. Not every voyage across the sea belongs to history. Some belong to memory, to myth, to whispers carried across centuries. Among all these legends, one name rises above the rest: Atlantis. Atlantis has captured the human imagination for over 2,000 years. A city that rose from the sea, dazzling in wealth and wisdom, then vanished in a single day of catastrophe. Was it real? Was it only a story? No one knows for certain, but the dream of Atlantis, and of other lost voyages, has shaped the way we see the ocean, not just as a place of travel, but as a keeper of mysteries. The first mention of Atlantis comes from the Greek philosopher Plato, around 360 BCE. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described an advanced island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he said, was greater than Libya and Asia combined, a mighty naval power with shining palaces, fertile fields, and advanced technology. But the Atlanteans grew greedy, prideful, and corrupt. To punish them, the gods sent earthquakes and floods. In a single day and night, the island sank beneath the sea, leaving only legend behind. Plato may have meant Atlantis as a moral allegory, a story about hubris and downfall. Yet ever since, people have searched for the lost city in the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean, even under the Antarctic ice. Why does Atlantis enchant us so deeply? Perhaps because it represents possibility. A whole civilization, advanced and wise, hidden beneath the waves. It reminds us that the sea is more than water. It is memory, a vast archive where entire worlds may sleep. And Atlantis is not alone. Other cultures tell similar tales. The Celtic otherworld spoke of sunlit isles beyond the Western Sea, places of eternal youth and joy. The Maoris of New Zealand told of Hawaii, the homeland across the ocean. Even in India, there are stories of Dwarka, a city swallowed by the sea, later rediscovered in ruins off the coast of Gujarat. These legends remind us that the ocean is not just a path but a veil. Behind it may lie things forgotten, half remembered, waiting to be dreamed again. Alongside lost cities, there are also tales of lost voyages, sailors who disappeared, fleets that never returned, expeditions that sailed into the horizon and left only questions. The Greeks told of Odysseus, wandering for 10 years across strange seas. Medieval Europe whispered about Brendan the Navigator, an Irish monk said to have reached far western lands centuries before Columbus. Chinese records speak of Admiral Zhang He's massive treasure fleets, some of which may have vanished into storms. Were these tales truth, fiction, or something in between? Perhaps a little of each. The sea swallows evidence easily. A storm, a reef, a miscalculation, and a ship disappears, leaving only stories. And yet, those stories keep their memory alive. Whether Atlantis was real or not may matter less than what it represents. Every culture projects its hopes and fears onto the sea. For some, it is paradise lost. For others, it is danger and punishment. For still others, it is mystery, a place where dreams and reality mingle. Atlantis is the mirror of our imagination. Some see it as proof of forgotten civilizations. Others see it as a warning about arrogance. Still others see it as inspiration. The idea that there is always more hidden than revealed. Close your eyes now and picture yourself aboard a quiet ship at night. The sea is calm, the stars are bright, and the horizon is endless. You lean on the rail, listening to the water lap against the hull. And in your mind, you imagine a city beneath the waves, towers rising, lights glowing faintly, streets still echoing with voices from long ago. You cannot prove it is there. You cannot touch it, but you can feel it just as countless. Dreamers before you felt it. Atlantis lives not in maps, but in hearts. The truth is, the ocean still hides more than it reveals. Even today, with satellites and sonar, we have mapped only a fraction of the seafloor. Entire mountain ranges lie unseen. Deep trenches remain unexplored. If ever there was a place for lost cities and forgotten voyages to hide, it is there. The dream of Atlantis reminds us of humility. The sea is not conquered. It still keeps its secrets, and maybe that is as it should be. Mystery is part of its beauty. As this chapter closes, let yourself rest in the mystery. Let Atlantis drift through your imagination like a shimmering mirage. Let the lost voyages sail again in your dreams, guided by stars no one else can see. The ocean holds many truths, but it also holds wonder. And tonight, you do not need answers. You need only the calm comfort of drifting on its waves, knowing that somewhere beneath, myths and memories still sleep. For most of human history, sailors looked upward for guidance. The stars were faithful companions, the sun a steady clock, the compass a trusted partner. But in our own time, a new kind of navigation has emerged, not written in myths, nor held in crystals, but beamed silently from above. This is the story of how humanity moved from stars to satellites, from sextants to smartphones, from the art of wayfinding to the science of global positioning. It is the story of how we learned to weave, an invisible net around the Earth, a net of signals, precise and constant, guiding ships, planes, cars, and even the steps of those who walk city streets. Before satellites, sailors relied on instruments refined over centuries. The sextant, perfected in the 18th century, allowed navigators to measure the angle between the horizon and a celestial body. With charts and calculations, they could pinpoint their latitude and longitude with astonishing accuracy. Picture a sailor on the deck of a tall ship, sextant in hand, squinting at the sun. The brass arcs gleam, the horizon wavers, the calculation is scribbled in a logbook. It was slow, deliberate, demanding, but it worked. For centuries, sextants and chronometers were the standard. And yet, even these tools had limits. Clouds could obscure the sky, calculations took time, errors crept in, navigators longed for something simpler, something certain. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. It was a small metal sphere that sent out radio signals. To most, it was a symbol of the space race. But to a handful of scientists, it was something more, proof that satellites could be used for navigation. By tracking Sputnik's signal, researchers could determine their location on Earth. If one satellite could do this, what could a network of satellites achieve? Thus began the dream of GPS, the Global Positioning System. Today, there are more than 30 GPS satellites orbiting Earth, arranged so that at any moment, at least 4 are visible above the horizon anywhere on the planet. Each satellite sends out a signal, a precise timestamp created by atomic clocks. Your phone, your car, even ships at sea listen to those signals. By calculating the delay between transmission and reception, the receiver determines your distance from each satellite. With 4 or more satellites, it can fix your position. Latitude, longitude, altitude within meters, sometimes within centimeters. No star chart, no compass needle, no calculation by hand, just instant certainty everywhere. For sailors of old, the ocean was vast and uncertain. Today, GPS has transformed it into a mapped highway. Cargo ships track their routes with pinpoint precision. Fishing boats know exactly where they are on the open sea. Airplanes cross oceans guided not by stars, but by signals. Even hikers in deep forests carry the same magic in their pockets. The ocean has not changed, but our relationship with it has. The mystery has been thinned, replaced by precision. Some mourn that loss of wonder. Others celebrate the safety it brings. Perhaps both are true. And yet, even as we rely on satellites, the old ways are not forgotten. The U.S. Navy still trains officers in celestial navigation, teaching them to use sextants and stars in case systems fail. Polynesian wayfinders sail again, using no instruments at all, proving that memory and tradition remain powerful. The compass is still carried. The stars still shine. The satellites have not erased them. They have joined them as new partners in the great story of navigation. It is easy to see GPS as only mathematics, as invisible radio signals and algorithms. But there is poetry in it too. Think of it, an invisible constellation of satellites whirling above us, each carrying clocks so precise they lose less than a billionth of a second per day. Together, they create harmony, a rhythm that encircles the Earth. To use GPS is to listen to a symphony of time itself, to catch whispers from the sky that tell you, gently and exactly, where you are. Close your eyes and imagine yourself not on an ancient canoe, but on a modern ship crossing the Atlantic. The deck hums with quiet engines. Screens glow softly in the cabin. On a monitor, a map shows a tiny blinking dot. Your ship moving smoothly along a line. The satellites above watch silently, their signals reaching you across 12,000 miles of space. You are never lost, you are always known. And yet, step outside the cabin, look up, and the stars are still there. Polaris still holds its place, Orion still rises. The Milky Way still spills across the sky. The old guides remain unchanged. The modern navigator is blessed with both, the invisible hand of satellites and the eternal light of stars. The journey from stars to satellites is not a replacement, but a continuation. Each step in navigation has built upon the last. The myths of Atlantis taught wonder. The Polynesians taught trust in nature. The Greeks measured, the Arabs calculated, the Vikings dared, the compass steadied, the sextant refined, and the satellites perfected. This is the arc of human curiosity, from looking up with awe to sending our own stars into orbit, from following the heavens to creating our own. As this chapter closes, let yourself drift in that thought, that you are guided always. Whether by Polaris or GPS, by the compass of your heart or the satellites above, direction is never lost. The stars shine, the satellites hum, the sea whispers, and you, gentle voyager, are safe upon it. Tonight, you sail not only on the waters of Earth, but on the waves of time, from ancient myths to modern machines, from crystals to codes, from stars to satellites. The journey is complete, and the harbor of sleep awaits. The story of navigation is, in the end, the story of us, of human beings looking out at the unknown and choosing not to turn back. From Polynesian canoes on the Pacific to Viking longships in the north, from Arab dhows crossing the Indian Ocean to European caravels spanning the Atlantic, every voyage was an act of faith. Faith in the stars, faith in the tools at hand, faith in the human spirit to endure and discover. Now, after hours of drifting through these tailies, you have traveled across centuries and seas. You have stood beside navigators on dark decks, lifted astrolabes to the heavens, held crystals to hidden suns, and watched compass needles steady under stormy skies. You have followed myths, measured mathematics, and felt the poetry of the stars. And just as they once set sail into mystery, so too are you now carried forward into the calm waters of sleep. What unites all these stories is a simple truth. Human beings have always sought connection. The ocean was not emptiness but a bridge. The stars were not distant but companions. Tools were not inventions alone but reflections of curiosity, of the need to know and belong. Polynesians read the swells as if they were sentences, Greeks turned constellations into myth and geometry, Arabs inscribed the heavens with names still spoken, Vikings found the sun in a stone, Europeans trusted a compass to guide them west. Each method was different, but the longing was the same. To find a way, to move forward, to trust that the universe would reveal its path. Close your eyes now and picture the sea. Not one sea, but all seas. The warm Pacific, the stormy Atlantic, the icy North, the sunlit Mediterranean, the endless Indian Ocean. See how they merge together, a single body of water surrounding the earth. It is the same with knowledge, the same with history. Each story we have told tonight, each culture, each sailor, each voyage, is not separate but connected. They are waves of the same ocean. They rise, crest, and fall, but together they create the rhythm of human progress. And just as the sea reflects the sky, so too does your mind reflect these stories. They are not distant tailies, but part of you now. Above every sailor, above every age, the stars remained constant. They shone over Polynesian canoes, over Greek triremes, over Viking longships, over European caravels. The same constellations, the same Polaris, the same Milky Way. Think of that for a moment. Across centuries, across cultures, across countless journeys, the stars have been faithful. They ask nothing. They burn with quiet certainty. They give their light freely to anyone who looks upward. Tonight, as you lie here, those same stars shine above you. They are the same guides, the same companions, the same reminders that you, too, are part of a Gria. The compass changed everything, yet in truth, it only made visible what was always there, a direction, a pull, a way forward. The heart works the same. Deep within you, there is a compass, always pointing toward what you need most. Peace, rest, belonging. You don't need to search for it. You don't need to force it. Like the sailor who trusts the needle, you can simply believe. The compass of your heart is steady, and tonight it points toward rest. Imagine now that you are aboard a ship, but not any single ship of history. It is a vessel woven from all voyages, carrying the spirit of every navigator. Its sails are Polynesian, its hull carved like a Viking longship, its deck wide like a caravel, its tools a blend of astrolabes and crystals and compasses. The sea is calm, the stars are bright, the needle points steady north. You are not lost. You are exactly where you should be. The ship glides forward, smooth as a dream. The water whispers. The night embraces you. And slowly, gently, you drift with it, not across oceans now, but across the sea of sleep. Every voyage, no matter how long, ends in a harbor. Tonight, your harbor is rest. The anchor drops, the sail lowers. The deck quiets, you feel the ship settle into calm waters. Your body is the ship, steady and safe. Your mind is the sailor, finally at peace. The stars above are your guardians, watching as you close your eyes. The journey is complete. You are home. The story of navigation is the story of faith, courage, and connection. It reminds us that even in the darkest night, there is guidance. Even in the widest sea, there is direction. And even in uncertainty, there is always a way forward. Let that truth carry you now into dreams. Trust the stars, trust the compass, trust the ocean of your own heart. You are safe. You are guided. You are at rest. And as the sailors of old found land after long journeys, so too will you find the shores of sleep. Gentle, quiet, endless.